She arrived early, before the room had fully woken up. The old building smelled faintly of polished wood and dust, the kind that settles quietly in places where music has lived for years. Sunlight slipped through tall windows and rested on the piano in the center of the room. It was a well-used instrument, its surface marked by time and careful hands. She stood near the doorway for a moment, taking it all in, breathing slowly, as if greeting an old friend. She wore plain clothes, nothing that drew attention. Her shoes were simple, her bag small and worn at the edges. Inside it were sheet notes folded carefully, though she had no real need for them. Still, she carried them out of habit, like a comfort she had never let go of. She walked softly, her steps almost silent, and chose a chair near the wall instead of the front. Others soon arrived. Some talked loudly, laughing and stretching their fingers, showing off how fast they could play scales in the air. A few glanced at her, then looked away. To them she seemed out of place. Too quiet. Too ordinary. Someone whispered that she must be new. Another guessed she was waiting for a lesson or maybe had come to watch. No one asked her anything directly. No one needed to. Their looks said enough. They assumed she was a beginner, someone at the start of a long road. She did not correct them. She simply smiled to herself and waited. As the room filled, the noise grew. Chairs scraped the floor. Pages turned. Someone played a loud, careless tune on the piano, missing notes but playing with confidence. A few people nodded in approval. She listened without judgment. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, not out of boredom, but out of memory. Sounds like these always carried her somewhere else. She remembered other rooms, larger ones, filled with hundreds of people sitting in silence. She remembered bright lights and the heavy feeling before the first note. She remembered hands shaking once, long ago, before they learned calm. Those memories stayed quiet inside her, never pushing forward, never asking to be seen. A voice at the front called for attention. The session was about to begin. Instructions were given in a firm but casual tone. Basic rules. Basic expectations. The speaker talked as if everyone there was still learning the basics, still finding their way. Several people nodded, some confidently, some nervously. She nodded too out of respect. Not because she needed the guidance, but because listening had always been part of her nature. She believed there was something to learn in every room, even ones that thought they were teaching her. Someone nearby leaned over and asked if it was her first time. The question was kind but carried a quiet assumption. She answered gently that she had been playing for a long time. The person smiled politely, not fully believing her, and said everyone starts somewhere. She did not argue. There was no reason to explain. Words often failed where music spoke clearly. Time passed slowly. The piano was played by several people, each trying to impress, each trying to be noticed. Mistakes were made. Some were laughed off, others hidden behind confidence. She noticed small things others missed, like stiff wrists or uneven timing. She noticed fear disguised as pride. She noticed how much everyone wanted to be seen. She sat still, hands resting in her lap. They looked ordinary. No rings. No marks that hinted at long years of work. But inside them lived muscle memory built over decades. Each finger knew where to go without thought. Each movement was stored deep, like a language learned so young it became part of the body. A short break was announced. People stood, stretching, talking loudly again. Someone finally asked her why she was so quiet. She smiled and said she liked to listen first. The answer seemed strange to them. In a place where everyone wanted to be heard, listening felt like weakness. She moved closer to the piano when no one was looking. Not to play, just to sit near it. The bench felt familiar under her hands. The keys were cool, slightly uneven from years of use. She did not press them. She didn't need to. Just being near was enough to feel grounded. Someone joked that she was guarding the piano like it was hers. Another laughed and said she probably dreamed of playing like the great legends. The words were meant lightly, but they landed heavy in the air for a moment. She smiled again, still calm, still silent. If they had looked closer, they might have noticed how relaxed she was. Beginners often carry tension, fear of doing something wrong. She carried none of that. She carried patience. The break ended. Attention returned to the front. The speaker asked if anyone new wanted to try a simple exercise. A few hands went up, eager. She did not raise hers. Not yet. Her time had never come from asking. Her gaze rested on the piano again. She felt the familiar pull, the quiet invitation. Music had always been like that for her. It never rushed. It waited. Around her, people continued to talk about goals and dreams, about one day being great. She had once spoken like that too, long before greatness had found her without warning. She knew how fragile dreams were when spoken too loudly. She adjusted her posture, straight but relaxed, the way years of practice had taught her. She took a slow breath. There was no rush. The room still believed its story about her, and that was fine. Stories had a way of changing on their own. Outside, a car passed, its sound fading quickly. Inside, the piano waited, silent and patient. So did she. No one noticed the small smile that appeared on her face, the kind that comes from knowing something others do not. Not from pride, but from quiet certainty. She had spent a lifetime being heard without speaking. Today would be no different. For now, she let them believe she was a novice. She had learned long ago that underestimation was not an insult. It was an opening. And the room, unaware of what it held, moved forward as if nothing special had arrived that morning. The room slowly came back to life after the short break. Chairs scraped lightly, voices filled the air with chatter, and a few nervous laughs bounced off the walls. She stayed where she was, quiet and observant, letting others take the spotlight. Everyone assumed she would remain in the shadows, perhaps too shy or inexperienced to step forward. They didn't know her, and she didn't correct them. She watched as a young man at the piano began to play. His fingers moved quickly, hitting the keys with force, confident in every note, but the sound was rough and uneven. He smiled proudly at his mistakes, thinking no one could hear them. The room nodded politely, clapping for effort rather than skill. She listened carefully, noticing small flaws that most missed entirely. The way his wrist twisted, the uneven pressure on the keys, the hesitation before certain chords. She remained silent, letting the music teach her nothing new, but still absorbing details. Nearby, someone was showing off a fast scale, trying to impress everyone. Fingers darted over the keys, and heads nodded in approval. But she could hear the tension behind the notes, the rigidity that would make the music brittle. She leaned back slightly, relaxed, knowing that ease and control could turn even a simple melody into something beautiful. The instructor moved from person to person, giving advice. To most, the words seemed important, full of guidance. To her, they were reminders of what she had already mastered long ago. She had learned these lessons in classrooms that had no walls, on stages with bright lights, and in empty rooms where only the music and her soul were present. She did not boast. There was no need. Those experiences were hers, and she carried them quietly. Someone whispered to another, speculating about her background. They guessed she had only recently started, that she was probably here to watch and learn. She smiled faintly at the comment, inwardly shaking her head. Years of discipline could not be guessed from appearance alone. Yet, the world often judged by what it could see. Posture, clothing, hands, age. She had learned to let people believe what they wanted. She began to notice the mistakes that others overlooked. A missed note here, a rush tempo there, hands that didn't relax between chords. She saw nervousness hidden behind confidence and ambition clouding natural rhythm. Each observation reminded her of her own journey. Long nights alone with the piano, hours spent learning each note until it felt like breathing, mistakes corrected silently in the darkness. One young player approached her, curiosity in his eyes. He asked if she had played before. She nodded gently and said she had been playing for many years. The boy gave a polite smile, unsure how to respond. He had expected beginners to fumble and hesitate, not to answer with quiet assurance. She did not offer proof and he did not press. Words could not convey decades of practice. Only music could. As the session continued, A few others attempted pieces they had prepared. Their efforts were earnest but clumsy. They sought attention, applause, and recognition, hoping their mistakes would be overlooked. She listened with the patience of someone who had seen all kinds of performances before, all types of effort, and all levels of skill. She did not judge them. She only observed. She thought back to her childhood, to small rooms with upright pianos and older teachers with sharp eyes. She remembered practicing until fingers bled, until her wrists ached, until the music became a part of her very being. Those memories stayed with her, quietly shaping every movement she made. They had made her patient, resilient, and precise, qualities invisible to anyone who judged by looks alone. The instructor called for a group exercise. Everyone shuffled to their positions. Some fumbled with sheet music, some whispered to each other for guidance, and some tried to mask their nervousness. She followed without hesitation, her movements calm, her steps measured. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. To the room, she looked like any other student following instructions. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. The exercise began. A simple tune, repeated slowly. Others hit wrong notes, stumbled, or played unevenly. She played with careful precision, letting each note breathe and resonate. Still, she did not draw attention to herself. To anyone watching casually, she looked competent but unremarkable. No grand gestures, no sudden flourishes, no dramatic pauses. Just steady, confident playing, as though the piano itself had invited her hands to move. A few moments passed, and the instructor offered corrections. People leaned in, listened, nodded, and tried again. She listened too, although she had little need for the advice. Her hands already knew how to adjust, how to balance, how to soften or strengthen a note. It was instinct, honed over countless performances, countless hours of practice. She did not flaunt it. She did not announce it. She let it exist quietly. During a short pause, she glanced around. Some students were exhausted, frustrated, or anxious. They were striving for recognition, hoping someone would notice their effort. She felt a gentle compassion for them. She had once been eager for applause too, once needed approval from those who watched. But she had learned that music itself was enough. The sound, the rhythm, the emotion. It was all a reward beyond words. Someone asked her if she wanted to try the exercise again, perhaps to show her skills. She shook her head politely, saying she preferred to observe. They nodded, still assuming she was inexperienced. They did not know her history, her journey, the countless stages she had graced in silence. And she did not correct them. There was no rush. Some stories unfolded slowly, and others only revealed themselves when the right moment arrived. The room buzzed with conversation again, a mix of nervous energy and excitement. People laughed, shared stories, and offered encouragement. She smiled faintly, not joining, not needing to. She had learned the value of silence, of listening, of letting others speak and make mistakes. Observation, she knew, was often more powerful than performance. She noticed small gestures, subtle habits that revealed character. A player tapping fingers nervously, a smile masking uncertainty, a glance toward the instructor for reassurance. She saw beyond the surface, recognizing patterns shaped by hope, fear, and determination. She understood that the journey of learning was not only about skill but also about patience, persistence, and self-belief. As the session drew on, she remained quiet, letting others shine and stumble in equal measure. She moved when needed, corrected posture silently with her presence, offered a calm example without words. She did not need to be seen to be influential. The way she carried herself spoke louder than any announcement. She had learned long ago that true mastery required no validation. Finally, a short break was called. The room shifted, people stretching, talking, laughing, and sometimes gossiping. A few glanced her way, curiosity flickering in their eyes. They still assumed she was a novice, but something in her calm, observant manner hinted at depth. They did not yet know the full story, and she let them continue in their ignorance. Underestimation, she thought, could be a gift. She walked slowly to the piano, not to play, but to touch the keys lightly. Her fingers hovered, resting gently on the surface. The keys were cool and familiar, even though she had never seen this piano before. She remembered the touch of others, of instruments long ago, and felt a quiet connection. Music, she knew, carried its own memory, its own voice. It remembered her as much as she remembered it. A student nearby asked why she did not play more often. She smiled softly and said that sometimes it was better to watch, to learn, and to wait. The words were simple, but they held meaning. Patience, she believed, was as important as talent. It allowed skill to grow without pressure, without expectation. As the break ended, she returned to her place silently, letting the room settle into quiet anticipation. Others rushed forward eagerly, but she remained composed. She had been underestimated, overlooked, and treated like a beginner, but she carried no resentment. Instead, she carried readiness, calmness, and the knowledge that her moment would come. When it did, there would be no doubt of her skill. For now she watched, she observed, she waited, and in her quiet, unnoticed way, she began to remind herself of what had shaped her. Long hours, dedication, patience, and love for the music. Others might not understand yet, but soon they would. And when they did, everything would change. She finally moved to the piano when the room had quieted. Her steps were soft and measured, drawing little attention. The others had been caught up in their performances and conversations, still assuming she was just another student. No one expected her to play, and she liked it that way. The underestimation gave her freedom. She sat at the bench and rested her hands gently on the keys. The piano was old but well cared for, each note resonating with a unique sound that seemed to respond to her touch. She did not rush, did not make a show. She simply let her fingers find their place, letting the music breathe naturally. Even the smallest touch produced harmony, and the room seemed to sense it, though the people there did not yet. She began with a simple piece, unassuming at first. The notes were soft, careful, measured. A few heads turned, curiosity flickering in their eyes. This wasn't the frantic playing of someone trying to impress. This was calm, deliberate, controlled. Each chord was placed with intention, every pause meaningful. It felt as if the piano itself had been waiting for her hands, the instrument remembering her skill from the first touch. At first, the sound was subtle, barely louder than a whisper, but it carried a richness that filled the room slowly. People leaned in, confused. They expected mistakes, hesitation, or uncertainty. Instead, they heard confidence, precision, and emotion intertwined. A smile formed on her lips, not proud, but serene, as she let the music speak for her. Some students glanced at each other, unsure of what they were hearing. Others paused mid-conversation, the sound pulling their attention like a quiet magnet. The room had been filled with ordinary attempts, small errors, and nervous energy. Now, the notes she played seemed to shift everything. The air felt different, heavier with focus, lighter with beauty. She moved into a more complex section, her fingers dancing across the keys with grace and control. Fast passages came effortlessly, yet they were never rushed. Each note was deliberate, each phrase shaped with care. The others watched in silence, astonished. Some held their breath, unsure if they had ever heard music played this way. The contrast between her mastery and their own struggles was stark, undeniable. Her playing was not about showing off. There were no dramatic gestures, no theatrical pauses, no desperate attempts for applause. It was pure music, honest and alive. The melody rose and fell naturally, carrying the emotion of someone who had lived with the piano for years, someone who had spoken through it more than words ever could. People began to whisper, trying to guess who she was. Some remembered her from brief mentions, others had no idea she had this kind of talent. Their assumptions, that she was a novice, shattered with every passing note. The room grew still, captivated. Even the instructor, who had seen many students come and go, paused, leaning closer to hear the skill unfolding. She glanced briefly at the sheet music in front of her, but it was unnecessary. Her fingers knew the notes already, Every chord, every nuance. Muscle memory, experience, and passion guided her. She did not falter, did not hesitate. The music came naturally, as if it had been inside her all along, waiting for this moment. One by one, others stopped playing, mesmerized. A few had been showing off their speed, their ability to hit many notes in a short time. Now they felt clumsy, their efforts pale in comparison. Some looked down at their hands, embarrassed, realizing they had underestimated her. She did not notice, did not care. Her focus was entirely on the piano, on the story she was telling through sound. The melody shifted, becoming deeper, more expressive. Emotion poured from her fingers, not forced, not exaggerated, but true. The music spoke of years of dedication, nights spent alone in practice, moments of triumph and moments of struggle. Every note carried weight not just in sound, but in meaning. A few students in the back leaned forward, eyes wide. Some covered their mouths, unable to speak. The silence was profound, as if the music had created its own space in the room. No one wanted to interrupt it. They simply listened, captivated by the skill and the story unfolding before them. She continued, moving seamlessly between passages that required both speed and precision. Her fingers curved naturally, wrists relaxed, movements fluid. Even the most complex sequences sounded effortless. The people around her, who had assumed she was inexperienced, could no longer deny her mastery. It was impossible to overlook. The instructor, who had been giving directions and corrections all morning, now watched with a mixture of surprise and admiration. They recognized techniques and subtleties that only someone truly skilled would know. Their eyes widened as they realized the depth of talent in front of them, talent that had been hidden beneath a calm, quiet exterior. She played for several minutes, each section more engaging than the last. The music built gradually, never forced, never abrupt. It flowed naturally, carrying the listeners along, drawing out feelings they didn't even know were there. The room had transformed from a casual gathering into a space where music ruled, where her talent could no longer be ignored. When she finally paused, the silence was thick, almost palpable. No one moved, no one spoke. They were absorbing what they had just heard, trying to reconcile their assumptions with the reality of her skill. The gap between expectation and truth had never been wider. Then, slowly, applause began. At first tentative, as if unsure whether it was allowed. Then louder, more confident, as the room realized the performance had ended, and they had witnessed something extraordinary. Hands clapped, eyes shone, and some students even whispered apologies for doubting her. She simply smiled, calm and serene, letting the music continue to linger in the air. Her presence at the piano had shifted everything. The assumptions of the room, the judgments made without knowledge, had been overturned by simple, undeniable skill. She had played not to prove anything, but because it was the only way she knew to communicate the depth of her experience. The truth could not be hidden anymore. People began to approach her cautiously, offering compliments, asking questions, trying to understand how someone so quiet, so unassuming, could have such mastery. She answered with gentle words, never boastful, never dismissive. She wanted them to feel the music, not her ego. Some students lingered, trying to play again, inspired by what they had heard. Others sat quietly, reflecting, perhaps realizing that their own assumptions had limited their understanding. And through it all, she remained calm, letting the experience speak for itself. No one could take the music away from the room. It had become part of everyone who had listened. She finally stood, taking a step back from the piano. The applause continued, some clapping longer than necessary, as if trying to hold onto the feeling that had filled the room. She gave a small nod, acknowledging the audience without taking ownership of the awe she had inspired. The music, she knew, had always been bigger than her. As she moved away, people whispered and exchanged looks of astonishment. They had underestimated her, treated her like a beginner, and now they realized they had been completely wrong. The quiet girl who had arrived so unassumingly was no ordinary student. She was a master, a musician who spoke through her instrument with years of dedication behind every note. The room was changed, though subtly. People had been reminded that talent could appear anywhere, that appearances could deceive, and that underestimation often led to surprise. They had witnessed the power of patience, skill, and genuine love for music. And she had done it all without a word, letting her hands and the piano tell the story she could not convey otherwise. Finally, the session moved on, other students played their pieces, but the memory of her performance lingered. The music she had created continued to echo in the minds of everyone present, leaving them changed, inspired, and deeply aware that sometimes, the quietest presence holds the greatest power. The room remained quiet after her performance, the echo of the piano still lingering in the air. People looked at one another in astonishment, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Their assumptions about her, the quiet girl who had seemed like a novice, were shattered. They had underestimated her, and the truth was finally undeniable. She remained calm, sitting back from the piano, her hands resting gently in her lap. There was no need to speak immediately. The music had already told the story she could not put into words. Yet, as the whispers began, curiosity and recognition spread like fire. Someone in the back finally spoke up, voice shaking slightly. "Wait, you've played like that before? You're not a beginner." Others turned, eyes widening, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. They had assumed her silence and calmness meant inexperience, but every note she had played carried decades of discipline and dedication. The instructor approached her, a mix of awe and disbelief in their expression. "I've seen many students in my life," they said quietly, "but I have never heard anything like that from someone so young or so quiet." She smiled gently, not out of pride, but with serenity. She had learned long ago that music was not about proving herself to others. It was about expressing truth, feeling, and connection. And in this room she had done exactly that. Whispers circulated among the students. Some remembered brief mentions of her past performances at local events. Others tried to piece together stories they had heard from friends or teachers. Slowly, it became clear that this quiet girl had not only skill, but she was a pianist who had achieved mastery long before they had met her. Recognition spread, and astonishment grew into admiration. One student, who had previously spoken to her casually, asked, How did you learn to play like that?" She looked at him kindly and said simply, "Years of practice, patience, and love for music." Her words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. Every note she had played carried memories of late nights, early mornings, and countless hours spent in solitude at the piano. Mistakes she had made and corrected alone, lessons learned silently, and moments of triumph felt only in the quiet of empty rooms. Another student whispered, She's a legend." The word hung in the air, slowly sinking in. They realized that they had been in the presence of someone truly remarkable, someone whose talent could not be measured by appearances or casual conversation. The instructor gestured for a short demonstration again, asking her to play another piece. She obliged, not for them, but because the music called to her. As her fingers moved across the keys, the room held its breath. Each note was more expressive than the last, each phrase revealing subtle nuances and technical mastery. The performance was no longer about impressing or surprising. It was simply about sharing the music that had lived within her for years. Students and instructors alike began to see patterns in her playing that only someone with deep understanding and experience could achieve. The way she balanced emotion with technique, the natural flow between notes, and the careful control of tempo, all demonstrated a lifetime of dedication. Every subtle pause, every gentle accent, every perfect chord spoke of mastery beyond ordinary comprehension. People who had underestimated her earlier felt a mix of awe and humility. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing how quick they had been to judge. Others were moved, their eyes glistening as the music reached places they had never anticipated. A quiet girl, thought to be inexperienced, had revealed a depth and talent they could barely comprehend. A teacher, known for being strict and observant, came closer, his voice full of respect. "I underestimated you. I thought you were just starting out. I was wrong. She simply nodded, acknowledging the words but not allowing them to change her calm demeanor. Validation was unnecessary. The truth of her music had spoken louder than any praise. One student, eyes wide with surprise, whispered to another, "She's played on stages we've only dreamed of." The realization spread, confirming that they had been in the presence of someone extraordinary. Their earlier assumptions, made from quiet observation and ordinary expectations, were replaced with admiration and respect. She allowed them to ask questions now, answering with gentle honesty. How she learned, the hours she practiced, the performances she had given, the quiet moments of doubt and determination. Each story added context to the music they had heard, deepening their understanding of who she truly was. The room had transformed from casual curiosity to profound respect. People who had laughed quietly at her assumed inexperience now spoke in hushed tones, careful not to interrupt the aura of talent that surrounded her. They had witnessed a living example of discipline, dedication, and love for music, the kind of skill that comes from a lifetime of focus and patience. She did not seek recognition. She did not demand attention. She simply allowed her music to reveal the truth. And in doing so, she taught a lesson that went beyond technique. Talent cannot be measured by appearances, and true mastery often comes quietly, without fanfare or announcement. Students began to approach her with newfound respect. Some asked for advice, some for guidance, and others simply for permission to observe her play. She welcomed them all with a calm smile, sharing insights gently, never diminishing the effort of others. Her presence was inspiring not because of pride, but because of authenticity and humility. The instructor spoke again, now with reverence. "We have been fortunate to witness this today. You've shown us that appearances can be deceiving, and talent can be hidden where least expected." She nodded quietly, knowing that the moment had been significant not just for her, but for everyone in the room. By the end of the session, the room was filled with a mixture of awe, reflection, and inspiration. Everyone who had underestimated her carried a new understanding. The quiet, unassuming girl who had arrived thinking no one would notice was now known as someone exceptional. She had revealed her truth through music, letting her skill speak louder than any introduction or claim. As people began to leave, many paused to offer words of admiration, gratitude, and acknowledgement. She accepted them with grace, her demeanor calm and kind. The music she had shared had left a mark on the room and the hearts of those present. A reminder that talent and dedication often exist quietly, waiting for the right moment to shine. Alone now, she looked back at the piano one last time. It was more than an instrument. It was a companion that had carried her through life, a partner in expression and truth. She touched the keys lightly, feeling the resonance, the history, and the presence of music that had always been a part of her. The truth had been revealed. She was no novice. She was a pianist of remarkable skill, a musician whose quiet demeanor had masked years of dedication and mastery. The room and everyone in it had learned that sometimes the greatest talents are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to show themselves. The applause had faded, but the air remained thick with awe and reflection. People lingered, some still sitting at the piano, others standing quietly, replaying the notes in their minds. The room had been transformed, not just by the music, but by the revelation of who she truly was. The quiet girl who had entered unnoticed was now a figure of respect and admiration, someone who had shown that talent could not be judged by appearances. She rose slowly from the piano bench, her movements calm and measured. There was no hurry, no sense of triumph, only serenity. The music had spoken, and that was all that mattered. Others approached, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence, offering words of praise, curiosity, and gratitude. She listened patiently, acknowledging each with a simple nod or gentle smile. A student, still astonished, asked, "How can someone be so skilled and remain so quiet?" She considered the question for a moment and replied softly, "Skill is not about being seen. It is about understanding, feeling, and practicing until it becomes a part of you. Words are not always necessary. The room seemed to absorb her answer, recognizing the truth in it. Many had been chasing attention, validation, and recognition, but she had shown them another way. Dedication and passion did not need applause to exist. The quiet work done in solitude, the patience cultivated over years, and the love for one's craft could speak louder than any declaration. Some students approached the piano again, trying to play pieces they had struggled with before. Her presence beside them was calming, a reminder of what patience and focus could achieve. She offered small guidance without dominating, showing them how to adjust posture, soften touch, or balance notes. Her teaching was subtle, human, and inspiring, making them realize that learning was as much about observation and humility as it was about practice. The instructor, still processing the revelation, spoke with sincerity. We often underestimate those who are quiet, those who do not boast. Today we have learned a lesson that goes beyond technique. Talent can be hidden, and patience can lead to moments we will never forget. She nodded in agreement, feeling the weight of their words without pride or arrogance. Recognition was not the goal. Sharing music and inspiring others was. Some students lingered, asking questions about her experiences, her challenges, and her journey. She shared stories of long nights practicing alone, of mistakes made and corrected without witness, and of small victories that no one had seen. Each story was simple, honest, and human, resonating deeply with those who listened. They realized that mastery was not only about natural ability but also about perseverance, love, and understanding. Outside the room, the sunlight had shifted, casting warm patterns on the piano and the floor. She paused to take it all in, appreciating the quiet beauty of the moment. Music had a way of creating time and space that nothing else could, and today had been a testament to that power. The lessons learned were not only technical but also personal, about humility, patience, and the unexpected depth in ordinary appearances. As the last students left, some still whispering among themselves about what they had witnessed, she remained for a moment longer, hands brushing the keys lightly. The piano responded with a soft echo, as if acknowledging her presence and the story they had shared. She felt a sense of completion, a quiet satisfaction that could not be measured by applause or attention. People had learned more than music that day. They had seen the dangers of judgment, the importance of observation, and the power of patience. They understood that true skill often appears in silence, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. They carried this lesson with them, a memory that would shape how they viewed others and themselves. She walked slowly toward the door, each step unhurried, leaving the room with a presence that lingered long after she was gone. The students and instructors remained, reflecting on what they had witnessed, feeling inspired, humbled, and aware that appearances often conceal more than they reveal. They had underestimated her, but now they understood that respect was earned not through words, but through quiet, persistent mastery. The sunlight outside seemed warmer as she stepped into it, a gentle reminder that life, like music, moves forward with subtle beauty. Her journey would continue, as it always had, filled with dedication, silence, and the deep joy of playing. And those who had seen her today would remember the lesson she had given without speaking a single boastful word. True mastery speaks for itself, and respect is a gift given to those who understand its value. For the rest of the day, the room felt different. People worked with renewed focus, listened more carefully, and observed more patiently. They had been reminded that every person has a story, every hand has experience, and every quiet presence may carry more than they ever imagined. The music she had shared remained in the air, a living reminder that talent and dedication are sometimes hidden in the most unexpected places. She disappeared from view, but the impression she left would linger far longer than the notes themselves. The students practiced with a new understanding. The instructor reflected on teaching with greater empathy, and the room itself seemed richer, as if it had been touched by something rare and profound. And in that quiet, unassuming way, she had changed everything without demanding attention, proving that greatness can come softly, humbly, and unexpectedly.